Hey folks, my name is Jen, and today we are going to do a recommendations video. It's been a little while since I've done like a recommendations video, I think. So I figured that I could recommend some classics. So I know that classics typically are something that people find very intimidating a lot of the time, or they might be something that you associate with boredom or just having a really bad time overall, probably because that's what you experienced when you read them during school. But I'm here to tell you that there are indeed some classics that are really worth a read. So I've got them broken down into sort of categories, I guess. First part being books that are fairly accessible. And when I mean fairly accessible, I mean like they are pretty easy to read and or they are page-turning, exciting. First of these that I'd mention would be Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Treasure Island, I know this is like one that probably a lot of people read when you were younger, maybe, if you read it at all. While I will admit that some of the language in here, mostly when it's like the pirates speaking and stuff like that, can be a little bit hard sometimes because it is written in like their like speech patterns. It is really entertaining, really exciting. It's not that long of a book, and yeah, like I said, it's pretty accessible. I think it's fairly easy read. And I mean, it's about pirates. Like, why would you not want to read about pirates? Unless you don't like pirates, which, okay. Treasure Island, if you don't know, is about a boy named Jim Hawkins. He and his parents own an inn, and one day a mysterious pirate or a mysterious stranger shows up, and shit happens, and there's treasure on an island and pirates and everything involved. So, next one is also a book that I've talked about pretty much ad nauseum at this point, and that's A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I think it is one of those books that every single person should read at some point, because the message overall, I think, is really worth something, and honestly, there's a lot of people in the world who should fucking understand it a little bit more, that mankind is your business. But anyway, it is, again, not that long of a book. This is actually a novella. It is set during the Christmas season, so, you know, maybe wait for that time of year to read it if you want to. But I think it is just beautifully descriptive. It also has a wonderful message. It's funny, darkly funny in a couple of places. It's a little bit creepy. There's ghosts involved. If you don't know what Christmas Carol's about, I don't know what rock you've been living under, but Ebenezer Scrooge, who is a miserly old man, is visited one night by the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and yet to come, to give him messages. Basically, have him take a look at his life and his surroundings of past and present and future Christmases. Another one that I'd say is really accessible is The Scarlet Pimpernel by Baroness Orczy. This is following a vigilante, the Scarlet Pimpernel, and his array of people that are basically trying to save a lot of French nobles from the guillotine during the French Revolution, and kind of safely get them over to England. So this is, again, swashbuckling, exciting. There's some spy work being done in here. There is a romance elements to it that I wasn't fully expecting. Just really exciting, adventurous. It was not written like that long ago. It was written in 1913, so the language not that hard to deal with. Also very fun, and it's also the first book in a whole series. So The Secret Garden is also, I think, really accessible. This is again another one of those that I think a lot of children have probably read, or maybe you're like me and didn't read this until you were an adult. This is by Frances Hudson Burnett. She also wrote A Little Princess, which, you know what, I guess I'd recommend that too. They're both little girl stories, but I don't think you have to be a little girl to read them and appreciate them overall. The Secret Garden is about a little girl who is orphaned at the beginning of the book and is sent to live at her uncle's dreary mansion on the moors. And she's always been like a sickly, bratty kind of kid, and she really kind of grows and gets to like people and things and care about something other than herself, and get a little healthier running out on the moors and trying to find secrets behind this secret garden that she has found. Really beautiful story, beautifully told, beautifully descriptive. I think it's very sweet overall. Again, accessible. If you tend to run more towards, hey, I like my classics, maybe more mystery, I mean, there's always, of course, Sherlock Holmes. I think you could technically count them under classics. I normally categorize them just in my mystery section overall. But of course, reading The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, always classic, always fun. They drag here and there, to be honest. They are a lot of them, but they are very interesting. Another mystery that I would recommend is The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. This one, it is a little bit thicker. It probably is a little bit more scary. I know the ones that I've mentioned have been fairly thin so far. You should not be scared by how thick this is, though, because, again, incredibly easy to read. The language, I was a little bit worried when I started this, but I didn't exactly fly through this thing because I was reading other things in between here, but story itself goes very quickly. It is very page-turning kind of mystery. I don't even know how to describe this fully without giving stuff away. I basically just say it involves a cursed moonstone and a family who are caught up in this curse, and there's also like some murder and trickery and thievery and a detective. So, very interesting story, and an early detective novel as well, if you're interested in that. This is also the guy who wrote The Woman in Black. I have not, or The Woman in White, that's what I mean. I have not read that one yet, but this was very entertaining. And the author himself, I haven't really researched that much about him, but he seems like a complicated fellow. I also talk about spooky things, some spooky, easy things to read. The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. This, I was actually shocked by how easy it was to read this. I don't know what I was anticipating exactly, but I expected a lot of flowery language, a lot of craziness, but not at all. Again, easy to read, very entertaining, and I think I said this at the time when I reviewed this novel. It felt like reading this was like I was sitting in the corner at a boring party, and some really interesting dude came and sat next to me and decided to gossip with me about society for a couple of hours. That is what this novel feels like. It feels like you run into someone very interesting at a party, and they are, while you're having drinks, gossiping to you about society and scandal and ghosts and phantoms and all kinds of craziness. This is the kind of way this novel feels overall. Like very casual and gossipy and absolutely ridiculous. There are some ridiculous things that happen in this book that are hard to believe, but just incredibly entertaining, fun, a couple of troubling bits. Honestly, some of these novels do have some troubling bits here and there throughout them, so I'd say, you know, if you're worried about anything in particular, definitely do your usual check or whatever, but yeah, entertaining, a little bit spooky, but not that much. How could I talk about spooky classics without bringing up Edgar Allan Poe? This year are his Ghostly Tales and Eerie poems. His poems are really entertaining, but then of course you do have, like I said, his eerie tales. A couple of Octobers ago, read some of his works. I had videos for those. Maybe I'll link them or I'll put them somewhere so you can see them if you're interested or not. You probably know them. He had the Raven. Everybody knows the Raven. There's The Fall of the House of Usher, The Murders in the Rue Morgue, which is, I think, one of the earliest detective stories ever, I think. The Old Portrait, Mask of the Red Death, The Pit and the Pendulum, The Telltale Heart, which I think might be my favorite, The Cask of Amontillado. Like, these are classic tales plus a bunch of others. Chilling. I wouldn't say anything is supremely horrifying exactly. There is one story, unfortunate story about a cat, which I was not able to finish reading in here, so that was horrifying in a different way. Everything else I wouldn't say it's not like modern horrifying, but a lot of it is creepy and unsettling and eerie, very eerie. So entertaining, and I will say these stories overall I think are pretty easy to get through. The poetry can get a little bit flowery, but still also very entertaining. If you want stuff that is more adventurous or full of more adventure, I would first of all suggest Dumas, of course. I have talked a lot about Count of Monte Cristo. I know that one is, I know Dumas can be a little bit of a hard sell because he wrote such thick novels a lot of the times. And I know, yeah, Count of Monte Cristo might be a hard sell because it's 1,200 pages, it's an undertaking. You could probably brain someone with most of the copies, but it is a lot of fun. It is entertaining. It has so much going on. The web that Dumas wove throughout this story is intense because it is telling the web of Dantes, the web that he wove around people throughout years so he could exact his revenge. It's amazing. I'm doing a reread of it, and I will admit that the first like 40 pages can be a little bit hard to get through, but once you get him like off on his like journey basically, things get crazy and are incredibly interesting and fun and entertaining and just bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers. And I will say that Dumas was also very good at like the swashbuckling stuff, like in Three Musketeers. So for Three Musketeers, very swashbuckling, very crazy. Again, I know a little bit scary to look at. I suppose this is like 700 pages, but it honestly does not feel like 700 pages when you're in the middle of reading it. It is fun, funny in a lot of parts. The Musketeers themselves are very interesting, kind of entertaining characters. Aramis, Porthos, and Athos are really entertaining, and every time they are hanging out with D'Artagnan, it's like something bonkers is gonna happen, and I basically spent a lot of this novel wondering what the hell these dumb chuckle fucks were gonna get up to next. And it's just, again, very entertaining. Some things having to do with like the politics at the time, that was a slight bit confusing, but there are like footnotes in the back, so if you are like me and you don't know a ton about French politics and history, especially at this time period, that's really helpful. But it makes shit like that interesting, very interesting, and Dumas had a way of ending chapters that could make you be like, oh shit, I need to get to the next one, which I think makes sense because a lot of his stuff, I believe, was like serialized, so you would want people to come back and say, oh my god, what happened? So yes, very entertaining. Again, there are some troubling passages, so yeah, like with anything, if stuff's gonna bother you, to look it up. But overall, swashbuckling, funny, very entertaining. More adventure would be Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. This is, of course, Phileas Fogg and his new servant, Passepartout, going around the world in 80 days as part of a bet that Fogg has made with members of his club. And they take all different kinds of transportation, trying to get around the world. You basically, in this novel, get to read about Jules Verne geeking the fuck out over travel. I have another book that I will talk about Jules Verne geeking out over other things, because if you ever read a Jules Verne novel, it was that man geeking out over some kind of thing. This is, I think, maybe a little bit more accessible than some of his others, because it very much, while it does have some technical things involved, it's not like heavy into that. It just is into like the aspects of transportation and mileage and stuff like that. So it's not as difficult as, say, reading about caverns and geology in Journey to the Center of the Earth, or another book that I will talk about in a little bit. So if you want to hear about someone, two crazy people traveling around the world in the 1800s, this is the one for it. If you want adventure and don't mind potentially some heavy descriptions, you could always read some Tolkien. I would suggest starting with The Hobbit, which is where I started. It was written, I think, mostly geared towards kids. You can tell because the way things are worded are a little bit different than the way they are worded in The Lord of the Rings themselves. So I would say this is a good starting point. Classic tale of Gandalf the Wizard convincing his friend, the Hobbit Bilbo Baggins, to be a burglar for a group of dwarves set on taking back their old home from the evil dragon Smaug. Yes, fun, very entertaining, interesting, and a good look at the world before you get into Lord of the Rings, in which a fellowship is created to hopefully destroy the One Ring and sow the evil in Middle-earth. So this series, entertaining. I know the descriptions are hard. The descriptions were what kept me away from this for a long time and not being able to get into the books, but honestly, the descriptions do eventually add to things, and if some stuff is too much, I think, this might be blasphemous of me to say, but I think if it really bothers you, you can skip reading the songs. I think I read like one song in this whole entire thing, and I skipped everything else because I was like, this is not necessary to me. Everything else in the novel, necessary. The songs, I could not care less. So, sorry if there are purists of you out there. That's just how I got through things. I'm saying I think you can probably enjoy these novels just as much without reading those particular parts. But these are fun if you want to know more information behind the movies, if you love the movies, or the show, I guess, that's been out. If you want to know more about that, or you're like, hey, I want more of these particular characters. Yo. The gang of characters in here, You've heard me talk about them a lot. They're great. So, entertaining, classic fantasy. If you want to read something a little bit more, not fantasy, but more like contemporary of the day, more social commentary, or maybe there's a little bit of like romance and some humor and stuff thrown in, Jane Austen. I would recommend Jane Austen. First off, I would recommend Northanger Abbey. I think this is probably the most accessible of her novels. This was, I believe, technically the one she wrote first, but it didn't get published until later. But it is following Catherine Morland. She has gone to Bath for the season, and she meets up with Henry Tilney and becomes kind of infatuated with him, and gets an invite to his family home. And because of the gothic novels that she has been entertained with, she makes a bunch of assumptions about things. It's funny and satirical and really entertaining, and yeah, I think this one's a little bit more playful than her others, so that's why I'm saying it's maybe a little bit more accessible than the others. It's a good introductory point, I think, for Jane Austen's novels. Pride and Prejudice, of course, is a classic. If you love either of the movies, you might be entertained and want to read the actual novel. I'm doing a reread of it right now and enjoying it immensely. And I would also suggest Persuasion. I think this one is very sweet. This is about a woman who was in love, Anne. She was in love with this man years ago, but due to opinions of her family, including some advice given, she broke off their courting relationship, basically. And it's been years now, and she's been suffering with her absolutely atrocious fucking family. And the guy has made something of himself and kind of comes back into her general circle, and it's a story of unrequited love and I guess a little bit of coming into one's own, just a little bit. I really liked this. I was very much in my feelings about this book at the time, I guess, that I read it, just because, man, some of the passages in here, super relatable. It does not matter that this is the 21st century and this was written in, when was this written? First edition text, 1818. Some of the shit in here, super fucking relatable. And I think that's the beauty of a lot of Jane Austen's novels. I know that some of the language can be a little bit to get used to, just the wording and phrasing of things, but honestly, a lot of the stuff that she talks about in here, it doesn't matter how much time has gone by. It's so fucking relatable, you guys. If you want something else that might feel relatable or might make you have some feelings about the way the world is now and how the way the world was when these books were written, you could always check out Kurt Vonnegut. I have come to adore Kurt Vonnegut's writing over the past couple of years, I'd say. I think you can't go wrong with his books at this point. I have only actually read 3 of them. Well, technically, sort of 4. One is a book full of, like, his writing advice. But of his, like, novels, I'd say Timequake, absolutely bizarre, but really interesting. I'd say this one's maybe a little bit, this one too, to be honest. Slaughterhouse-Five. I'd say these two are a little bit more of a harder read. This one deals a lot with, like, grief and stuff, and this one, I mean, this is probably his most well-known novel, and this has to do a lot of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey, and some alien stuff and all kinds of things, but it is based heavily off of his time as a POW in Germany during World War II, especially his time in Dresden when Dresden was firebombed by the Allies, in the aftermath of that. So, I mean, there's fictional characters, but this is based heavily off of his own experiences, and it's rough in parts. And then you have God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, which is, I guess, a little more lighter in some aspects, and has a lot to do with commentary on caring about others, giving a shit, especially those who have more. Maybe you should try to care more about those who have a less than you kind of situation, and everybody should care more about each other. Just a lot of stuff going on in here. I did do a vlog while I was reading this last year, and I do still want to like finish editing that and get that out at some point. So you hear more about that at that point. But I'd say if you want some satire with your classics and you want something that is incredibly easy to read and entertaining, while a couple of them might feel a little bit more grim in places, these are dark satire in a lot of sections. I would say you can't go wrong with Kurt Vonnegut. Like I said, I've only read these 3 so far. I intend to read all of his novels, and he's just really entertaining and a really good writer. And the last couple that I'd talk about, I think, are books that are also a little bit more of harder reads, but I think that I'd also like to recommend. I do have more I could probably recommend, but I haven't actually finished reading them yet, so I can't really recommend them yet because I haven't finished reading them, but maybe I'll do another one of these at some point. The first of these that I recommend, the reason I'm saying it's a little bit more of a harder read because it's so goddamn dense. It's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. Like I said, the man was a goddamn geek. This time he's geeking out about the ocean and its depths and undersea everything. Biology, marine biology, things. A lot of fantastical things in here, obviously. This is following a man who has built the Nautilus, which is a giant submarine type thing that he travels in the ocean floor, and he fully, like, farms algae and fish for varying purposes that you don't actually use shit for at this point. I don't know. Anyway, a lot of fantastical stuff, but a lot of stuff is also based in, I guess, whatever scientific fact was around at the time, a lot of the fish facts and stuff like that. Man's geeking out about shit, you know, so a lot of sciencey stuff. I will say the parts that weren't heavy on the biology shit, I was super into. The parts that got a little too technical, I was not so much into. But if that is something that is interesting to you, or you just like to read about something where the author was clearly geeking out over shit, this is one for that, especially if you want to ever hear about where the hell Captain Nemo and the Nautilus came from. There you go. A couple other books that I'd say are maybe a little bit harder, is more based on contents overall, I suppose. First being The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This is about a woman named Celie. It actually follows her from when she's a teenager through till she's like, what is she, in her 40s or 50s, I think. And this novel kind of moves along through the struggles of her life. She basically slowly is coming into her own and seeking some kind of contentment and happiness. She has not had an easy life. The beginning of the novel basically is starting out where she has been assaulted by her father, and continues on from there to a forced marriage to an abusive man and his kind of abusive children, and just the introduction of new characters, including people that she comes to care for. And it's just It is honestly a truly rough read in parts. It is told in letters, it's a epistle novel, and it is hard to read in a lot of sections, but I think it is also very beautifully told. It's a very raw novel, kind of in your face with stuff that was happening at the time. I think this was set during the, I want to say the 20s or 30s. Well, it goes over a series of time following her life, but it is still really beautiful, and it is heartbreaking but also beautiful to watch her journey to find some form of happiness. And yeah, so I'd say I definitely, again, with any of these, check like trigger warnings or something like that, but again, really good. And the last one I'd mention is partially for contents, but also partially because it's another thick boy. I would also recommend Bleak House by Charles Dickens. I know this one's like 600, 700 pages. It's, but again, with the web weaving here, everything in this novel, a lot of characters in here are connected. This is largely following young ward of the court, Esther Summerson, who's been taken in as like a companion for a couple of rich wards of the court who their guardian has recently come to take care of all of them. They're all kind of embroiled in this law case called Jarndyce and Jarndyce, which has been dragging on for like what is it, like 100 years at this point, I think. But there's also like loads of people involved. Like they're involved, they're tied together, there's military people tied together, there's everyone from the highest aristocratic families to the boy who sweeps the sidewalks. They are all interconnected. Their stories are all interconnected, and it kind of flips back and forth between all of these stories and kind of shows how they are all interconnected with each other. Each person affects each other. Each thing that happens to each person affects another person, and Dickens was really trying to give an overall message over here about how we all are interconnected, no matter what part of society we are in, and we should all maybe be a little more noticing and caring of each other in general. It's also a big look at corruption in their society at the time as well. I think I said at the time, this calls it probably his masterpiece, and finishing reading it, I would definitely agree that this is definitely up there in one of his greatest novels ever. Incredibly ambitious and very well told, and I've heard people say Dickens is hard to get into, but I don't know, I find him to be, his wording to be fairly easy. I would say if you don't have a problem getting into Dumas, or yeah, maybe like Dumas, if you don't have a problem getting into Dumas, you would not have a problem getting into Dickens. So yeah, basically that is everything that I'd recommend. I hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know if there's any classics you think I should have mentioned, or what classics you would recommend. Alright, thank you for watching, thank you for always watching, and I will see you next time.